Hello, I'm obviously not there, but you still need to be good. So make sure you're listening, kids, because I can see you. I can see you through this screen. Ms. Petrashik has just assigned you guys an essay, and it has to relate the stuff that you've learned in science with a mission to Mars. So quickly, I'm going to run over some of the concepts that are listed on my webpage and give you a hand trying to correlate some of those things. One of the first things we have on my webpage is Newton's first law of motion. There are many instances on the rover trip, all the way from liftoff to touching down, where Newton's first law is being used. That's when you have an object at rest or an object in motion, and it continues at rest or in motion until force acts on it. Next, we have Newton's second law. Now, Newton's second law is a little bit more difficult to apply, but really, anytime you can find a force changing the way an object is moving, you could use that as an example. Just make sure that your example is very specific to something that occurs during the mission. Next, Newton's third law is probably one of the safest ones to go with. Anytime you can find an action and a reaction that occurs as a result, you can identify Newton's third law as coming into play. And one of the greatest examples of this is anytime you have thrusters. You have thrust going in one direction and you have the vehicle moving in the opposite direction. Other vocabulary that really must appear in your essay would be words like force, friction, speed, velocity. These are the terms that you should be using consistently throughout your essay. Next up, gravity. Gravity obviously plays a huge role in not only leaving Earth's gravity and then having the absence of gravity along the way, but then dealing with Mars's gravity as you draw closer to it. Air resistance is probably one of the things we focused on the most. EDL teams may want to reference air resistance and how it comes into play in a mission to Mars, especially touching down. But not only touching down, but also on liftoff. You might remember something about the fairing on the top of the rocket. That would be a great example to use also. Other terms that could be used, projectile motion, even though that might be a little bit of a stretch. Terminal velocity could definitely occur, and again, terminal velocity is the fastest a falling object can go due to air resistance. So if you change the configuration of the landing vehicle, you can change the terminal velocity and make it fall slower. We do talk about things going into orbit, things needing to have orbital velocity, but one of the most important of these terms right at the end would be escape velocity. In order to leave a planet's gravitational field, you must achieve escape velocity, and obviously that has to happen during your mission. Again, those are all concepts that should be referenced, but when you reference them, you need to reference them specifically with an explanation. So make sure in your essay that if you use a word, you define it in context and then find a specific time during the mission where that concept is being used. I also listed some helpful vocabulary for you down at the bottom that's really specific to just Mars and NASA. Good words to use would be words like launch phase, cruise phase, entry, descent, and landing phase. Those would really be three different parts of this mission. You have the launch phase, which would be obviously when the rocket's attached and you're accelerating. Cruise phase, which would be that point in time between Earth and Mars, the 7 months or so that it's simply cruising on its way there. And then finally, the 7 minutes of terror, your entry, descent, and landing. So again, use terms like that in your essay when you're describing different parts of the mission. Other important words that should definitely be there: heat shield, parachute, landing bags. The launch vehicle for Curiosity, in case you're going to reference it, is the Atlas V rocket. For Spirit and Opportunity, it was the Delta II, because those are slightly, well, actually, they're a lot smaller of rovers, so they do not need quite as much force in order to get them up to escape velocity. Finally, when you're talking about Mars rover Curiosity, I'd say the first time you reference it in your paper, you want to use the term Mars rover Curiosity. Then after that, you can refer to it as a Curiosity or MSL. That's what they call it actually at JPL. They call it the Mars Science Laboratory. Curiosity is kind of a pet name for it, believe it or not. And then finally, if you wanted to get into it, you could get into the concept of the universal bus design. We did learn that when we were talking about the LADEE mission early in the year, and the universal bus, common bus design came into play with the universal drive platform of the rover. Some of you may choose to go that route in when talking about the design At the bottom of the page, I also put some really advanced terms for the Studley people out there. You could get into the concept of planetary motion and the path that the rovers need to take in order to get from Earth to Mars. You could use words like ellipse when you're describing those paths and orbits. And then for those of you who wish to get into that communication lag, some of you might remember that it takes almost 15 minutes for the signal to get back from Mars to Earth. So really what we're looking at there is radio waves and how fast radio waves go compared to the distance that Mars is away. And just for reference, radio waves do travel at the speed of light. So those last terms there at the bottom of the page really are for people that want to dig in real deep to those concepts. It would not be necessary to go that route, but it would be really interesting if you wanted to. I'll be back at school tomorrow. I'll also be on email and Twitter today. So if you have any questions at all, I might be able to help point you in the right direction. This is the final piece of this rover, and it is really important that we get some high-quality essays to put an exclamation point on a great project that you guys had. So good luck to you, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.